beauty is the way to save the world. And Handel had a real sense of beauty. Okay, we come to a mathematician for Hinduism, Madhava of Sangamagrama, who lived from 1340 to 1425. He was a Hindu mathematician and a genius. The contribution of Indian mathematicians is profound. Their works were famous, and we used the Hindu numeral system that came from them, so we're very grateful.
And it seems nowadays in science, computer science and mathematics, they are doing well.
Yes, India's doing some good stuff. Yes, I came across somebody's just finished a PhD at Cambridge, actually, as I was researching for the Sanskrit language, which I also did this week. As a young man, he's only in his 20s, an Indian, doing a PhD in Cambridge on the grammar writer called Panini, who was the first to analyse the Sanskrit language into its fundamental constituent parts, with almost mathematical precision. He analysed sound and the different types of sounds. Like I'm speaking using sound. It's a mathematical thing. You can work out the formula, and then you can program an AI thing, as they've done, to produce sound. So this chap's done a PhD. He reckons he's cracked a fundamental dilemma in Panini's work, which was to do with which rules you apply in which sequence of sounds, because it seems a bit arbitrary. Panini gave us a brilliant text on grammar, but he didn't explain all the details. So scholars have not been able to fully understand Panini's work. Before this guy did, in his PhD, crack it, working at the University of Cambridge under a Sanskrit professor who said, yeah, you've done it and passed it. So we've just finally worked out what Panini was doing. And that's a sort of grammatical mathematics, very advanced, and it took an Indian genius to figure this out. Madhava, yes, hats off to you, sir, we honour him. So where's the Hindus line?
They're on the left side, middle.
Yeah.
Which one? I don't know.
I think I'd put him in 63, because the Brahma is for the intellectuals, the mathematicians, scientists. They're not so much going to the temple and lighting candles to Shiva. That's the Shiva ones. They're more the intellectuals who do, profound things like mathematics and philosophy, like Shankara and stuff. So that's 63, yeah. Okay, we come to our Buddhists. We're nearly done. Today we have Mishaka, a Buddhist patriarch in ancient India, the sixth patriarch after Buddha. So where would he be?
Oh, it's a red one.
Yeah.
The first or second, 24, 25th? 25?
Yeah, he's probably in the 24th. He's the earliest generation of Buddhist, sixth patriarch. So he's only a couple of hundred years from Buddha, and I don't think Mahayana had fully evolved by then. So we'd call him Theravadin, probably. I don't have my Buddhist reference book to look him up in detail, sadly, but my intuition is he'd be in box 24. And then finally we come to our Christian column, and today we have Saint Benno, Saint Pudes, one of the 70 disciples sent out by Christ, Saint Sidicus, Saint Ishmael of Wales, who was the 6th century son of the Prince of Cornwall, Budic. And there's, I'm really into the study of Celtic saints, obviously. A lot of information about him here. We also celebrate today Jean-François Régis, 1597, born in the Languedoc. His father had been recently ennobled. He was educated at the Jesuit College of Béziers. In 1616 he became a Jesuit in Toulouse, and he took his vows 2 years later. Jean-François Régis. He studied rhetoric at Cahors, and he pursued his studies in philosophy, and he was particularly interested in preaching and teaching. He studied theology at Toulouse in 1628 and became a priest at the age of 31. And his life was a sort of tireless work of spreading a highly intellectual form of Christianity, but in a way that common people could understand as well. It's a very difficult skill, that, which I learned the hard way as a teacher, because I'd done years of academic training and highly sophisticated stuff, and then you stand in front of a group of 30 teenagers who don't even have the vocabulary to understand all that stuff. So you've got to translate it into normal street language. And he obviously had the same problem. But he succeeded. He worked with victims of the plague in Toulouse, and he had a headquarters at the Jesuit College of Montpellier, worked with hospitals, and he's very known for his work with women and orphans, founding safe houses and things. And he was able to collect money from the rich to then hand it out to the poor and needy. So that was good stuff. He travelled around, particularly in the south west of France. He lived quite a simple life himself, and he eventually was declared a saint. He, after he died, he wanted to go to Canada to work as a missionary in Canada. Oh. But he never actually got there because he used to walk everywhere, and one winter it was really, really cold and snowing, and he got pneumonia and died at the age of 43 only, this chap, having never got to Canada. Anyway, he's honoured here in France as a great saint in the Catholic tradition. Where would he be in the lists?
Christian Catholic somewhere, and maybe 43.
Yeah, 43, 43. That's the Roman Catholic tradition. So, okay, so there's our list of saints and sages today. It's an interesting bunch, I think. And I had a dream this last week. I don't normally share dreams, but I want to share a dream I had. Which is, it was a very strange dream, sort of sequence of dreams, that it was shown to me I have to make a board game, like Monopoly, based on the table. So there are going to be 99 squares in the board game. You move the pieces round. The pieces are coloured, one of 15 colours, according to which genre you're in, whether you're doing the Buddhism piece or the Christian or whatever. And there are 10 sages and saints chosen, only 10 from each of them. So that's 15 categories, they have 10 sages. So obviously from the Chinese you'd have Confucius and Lao Tzu. But how to choose the 10 greatest Christian sages, it'll be fun to work it out, right? Or the 10 Muslims or whatever. But then what occurred to me is there are patterns repeated in the lives of all these sages and saints. So as you move around the board, you land on a square, and you then have a little booklet that goes with the game, and it tells you, for each of these sages, there's a challenge. You land on the square called challenge, and then it's appropriate to their life. So the challenge of, or there's a square called temptations. So you're tempted by power or money or sex. In Jesus' case, if you're playing the Jesus piece going around, he had his temptations. We know from the gospel he was tempted to become ruler of the world, and to give in to the devil, who would give him all power. You know, those we know from Buddha, Jesus, his temptation. But Buddha also had temptations, which was to say nothing about being enlightened and just keep quiet, just stay in the forest. Why should I bother to teach? You know, that was his temptation. And so, anyway, in the dream, it was shown to me how to make this board game, which I'd love to. I'm going to make a prototype and then hopefully get a copy made, and then because it would get the table more out there in amongst the people, and then also the other thing would be like helpers come, heavenly helpers and human helpers. So I think all these sages, and eventually you reach the innermost square of the game, which is the enlightenments. You finally reach enlightenment. And all these sages, we looked at some of them today, they're all on a spiritual journey, an intellectual journey. Maybe they don't reach total enlightenment in one life, you know, it's a long way to go. Or maybe you reach a kind of enlightenment. But in the board game, everyone gets a chance. And you kind of, anyway, I've worked it all out as a result of this dream. So I'm looking forward to, I'll report on that as we go nearer. I think it's time for a tarot of the gods to finish, because I think we won't do, you know, we've done the periodic table. Let's choose a tarot, because we haven't done the gods for a while. Yes. So I'll let you choose. Yes. Okay, we've got an Egyptian one, which is what we were talking about. Yes, we have the 9 of fire, which in the Tarot of the Gods, we have the earth, air, fire, water suits. And he's the 9 of fire, which is a important, deity. So, one of the most significant of the ancient Egyptian deities. He was the god of kingship and also the sky, represented by the hawk. So,
what is the hawk? Is that? No?
I think it's in his name, is the cartouche there, the bird. I think. Sorry, not a hawk, a falcon. A falcon.
Okay.
Representing, and his head, if you look at it, is also a falcon.
Not a goose this time, it's not galb.
Yeah, it's a falcon. So he was the deity of Upper Egypt, and he became the first known national god, recognized throughout all of Egypt. And the pharaoh was seen as the manifestation of Horus in life and Osiris in death. And Horus was the son of Isis and Osiris, and they had a tragic love affair, marriage, which Set was always trying to cause trouble over, as we know, and it was Horus that avenged his father's killing, Osiris's death at the hands of Set. So I think Horus represents that ultimate transcendental justice that puts things right, you know, that Kant talks about, that the core of justice is a transcendental thing. It doesn't exist always on this plane, because this plane is full of people causing trouble. But that's why I think the Egyptians believed in heavenly justice. And Horus is the guardian of his mother, Isis. There are many versions of the story. I give some of them in the text that goes with the cards. He was also, when the Greeks came to Egypt and synthesized, and we had a sort of Greek-Egyptian synthesis going on, Harpocrates became a deity that was very important to them, and represented by a youth with his finger on his lips. So it stood for silence and secrecy. The highest mysteries cannot be always spoken. And it's interesting because in 19th century Britain, when the Golden Dawn was founded as an occult society, a lot of them were really into Egyptian spirituality, like a revised Egyptian spirituality. And a colleague of mine has done a PhD on this, looking at contemporary New Egyptian spirituality. And also we have the Fellowship of Isis, was set up in Ireland by brother and sister, Reverend Durden Robertson. And I went to the Fellowship of Isis castle in 1983 in Ireland and joined the fellowship. Technically, I'm a priest of Isis, as well as everything else. And so Horus, is an important deity in these new versions of ancient Egyptian religion. So it didn't die, it just transmogrified. And this colleague of mine, an Australian academic, has written, some brilliant, did a thesis on all this stuff, and teaches at the University of Melbourne. So, and she's also interested in the Thelemite tradition, founded by Alist Crowley, who was a member of the Golden Dawn, a British poet and mountaineer and philosopher and magician, who had certain mystical experiences around Horus when he went to Egypt on his honeymoon. And he channeled this thing called the Book of the Law in 3 days in 1904 from Iwas, a sort of angelic figure. And Harpocrates came to him. Iwas, the angel, was supposed to be the minister of Harpocrates. And so there are now many tens of thousands of Thelemites. It's a new religious movement. It's got its own box, actually, on the table. Where are the new religious movements?
NRM.
Yeah.
Yes, it's the grey line.
Yeah. Thelema, it's called.
Yes, 107.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's going still strong, and about 25,000 people, roughly, follow that. What's interesting is that Jack Parsons, who discovered how to lift rockets up into the air from California, is a rocket scientist. We wouldn't have had Saturn V without Jack Parsons working out the fuel to get 2 million pounds of weight up into the upper atmosphere. It's thanks to Jack Parsons, who was a Thelemite follower. He was a devotee of this tradition, which is so weird if you think about it, that this amazing technology of rocket science came out of Thelemite. But it's not that weird, because Crowley was an interesting man who he wanted magic to become a science. He wrote this famous book called Magic, which was a science. And here's a quote from it. "The word of the law is Thelema. Who call us Thelemites will do no wrong, if he look but close into the word. For there are therein 3 grades, the hermit, the lover, and the man of the earth. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. I am the hawk-headed lord of silence and of strength. My Nemesis shrouds the night blue sky. There is a splendour in my name, hidden and glorious as the sun of midnight is ever the sun. So, you know, Crowley was a poet. You can see it coming through. And I explain a lot in that. So that's an example of how the worship of Horus still lives on. And it's there in the guy that invented rocket science, getting up to the Saturn rockets. He didn't design the Saturn, but he designed the rocket fuel that made that possible. So, yeah, Horus, still going strong after all these years, still trying to make justice come out. My take on rockets is that they shouldn't be used to transport nuclear weapons. Today we also celebrate the fact that Veron Brown, the inventor of the rocket as such, and I think young Jack Parsons went to hear a lecture by Veron Brown. Today is the day on which Veron Brown died in 1977. He'd been a German rocket scientist who was taken to America at the end of World War II and helped build the rocket traditions of America. Well, I don't want to see these things used for war. It would be horrendous, and that's why it's so important we end the war between Russia and Ukraine before anyone starts throwing rockets around. My solution to that is to work out what were they being quiet about, these ancient mystics. What's the silence that Crowley asks us to hear, or that all these great thinkers of the past that we've looked at? What is that innermost secret silence? And can't we find that as the key to peace, which I think is more powerful than all the rockets and the bombs? They make a big noise, they're like, fireworks. But on that note, I want to end with one last thing before I do a poem. I'm going to finish with a poem, but there's another thing that's happened this week that's worth noting. A couple of academic colleagues of mine that, are quite lively, have just written a very interesting paper, which has come to my attention this week. And one of them is a chap called Dr. Tim Lomas, who's at Harvard. He's a psychologist, and he's interested in the psychology of well-being. Published many, many articles, fascinating guy, books, and all about happiness and well-being. He used to teach at the University of East London, in London, for many years, but he's now gone to Harvard. He's just published an article called The Case for Crypto-Terrestrials. And it's the first time that an academic has come out and said, maybe there's something to all these UFOs and strange phenomena, UAPs. And he's put forward a hypothesis called human crypto-terrestrials. And there are 4 possibilities that they're exploring in this paper, which is being published, as we speak. He's on ResearchGate, if you want to look him up. One is that there are human crypto-terrestrials. So it's not an extraterrestrial. These are humans, but they are descendants of a technologically advanced ancient human civilization that was maybe largely destroyed a long time ago, but has now come down. And this is a theory put forward by lots of people like Graham Hancock and stuff, that ancient times there were much more intelligent, advanced humans, and they still survive in pockets. I know people that say they got a base under the earth, and I don't know, I suspend judgment, but it's a hypothesis, isn't it? There's another hypothesis, which is that maybe there are advanced non-human civilizations. Why should they be human types? Maybe they're more like some kind of terrestrial animal that's evolved to live in stealth underground or under the water or something, but are intelligent. So maybe we're sharing this planet with intelligent other life forms. That's hypothesis number 2. And there are sightings of all these things, like the Sasquatch, and these kind of strange sightings that are reported. Another hypothesis number 3 that Tim is putting forward is that these extraterrestrial aliens have come from elsewhere in the universe, and they've descended on planet Earth. So they're not indigenous, but they've arrived here from elsewhere in the cosmos. But they've taken on human forms to kind of hang out amongst us. And if you remember, there was a film by David Bowie a while ago called The Man Who Fell to Earth that was about that. And then the 4th hypothesis is that maybe these crypto-terrestrials are magical beings. They come from some other dimension. They're not like physical beings with forms like us. But they take a visual, shimmering type of, ghostly type appearance. So they're spiritual beings in some other realm. And shamans can see them, maybe. But we normal people can't. And that would be someone like the Iwas that gave Crowley the Book of the Law. There are these spiritual beings. And in the table, maybe that's what the gods are. They're some sort of magical beings that exist in other dimensions. Anyway, it's interesting that finally some academics are talking about this. The other thing Tim Lomas has done, which I think is really interesting, and this is synchronicity, is he's very interested in creating a lexicography for cross-cultural dialogue. And so he's written papers on, say, words for love in all different languages and cultures, and other words in similar groupings. Now, what he doesn't know, this is really interesting, is years ago when I was a wee little, starting out on my academic career in the early 80s, I was doing a degree at what was his university called the University of East London. In those days it was called the North East London Polytechnic. It wasn't even a full university. But they did a degree by independent studies. So I submitted a research proposal to them in about 83, which was based on all my years of study and academic work up to then, and I was going to do a lexicographic study of key contested terms in all different languages. It was a completely ridiculous, over-the-top, ambitious type of thing for a 25-year-old to be doing. And I could only find one guy that would supervise me there, and that was the chaplain. The Christian chaplain said, fine, I'll do it, no problem, because I was going to look at Christian terminology and all the other religions. Anyway, it didn't happen. I went and did my degree at London University. But what's so nice is this guy, Tim Lomas, has been basically doing the work that I left in seed form. Maybe picked up on it. Maybe the chaplain showed him my proposal, I don't know. I found that a strange synchronicity. Yes, so I don't know, the jury's out. And they say in their paper that, we don't know which one it is. We're just asking the questions. And I think there's a really important word in that paper that I discovered, which is epistemic humility. So what is epistemic humility? It's admitting you don't know something. Epistemic arrogance, episteme is the Greek for knowing. Epistemology is the scientific study of knowing in philosophy. So epistemological arrogance is to know everything. You meet people like that, they're really annoying. But epistemic humility is to say, well, we don't know some stuff. And they're saying we don't know which, if any, of these 4 hypotheses is true. I mean, it's another hypothesis is all these visualizations and close encounters of the 4th kind and abductions. They're all hallucinations. They're all fantasies caused by the sort of frustrated sex life of the person having the visualizations when they dream they're taken up into a spaceship and make love to a stranger. That's another hypothesis, So we can just suspend judgment. Andrew Mack, who also taught at Harvard, explored this stuff. He did books on abduction and things. So let's have more epistemic humility, is what they're saying. And I think we won't get very far at stopping the missiles, because the missiles are threatening because people are arrogant. You know, their culture, their nation thinks they're absolutely right and the other guys are absolutely wrong. So the Israelis think they're so right, they have the right to wipe out the Palestinians, and vice versa. Well, epistemic humility is needed here. So that's, I think, the good note to end this. Okay, any questions or comments you'd like to make before we do the poem?
One small remark about during your introduction, you talked about the way of through meditation going to the past, and that could change the past. I like very much the way of thinking as a symmetry of this, the way of we are in the shit now, but people in the future, they are helping us.
Yeah, well, that's what my novel's about.
Ah.
This is what I wrote my novel about. Yeah. Which you're welcome to borrow. And anyone that wants to read about this novel is available. Which is Beyond the Apocalypse, a preliminary report on the research findings of the Global History Commission, which is set up way in the future. So this is playing with that idea of time travel. Yes, I thought of a bon mot, because I've been thinking a lot about time. As a historian, time is my métier. And I was thinking, what is time for? Why is it? And what occurred to me is time is a way of ordering experience.
I've heard of that.
So that if we were open to all experiences all at once, like it would just be like a blank white noise. We have to have experiences one after the other. So we have a beginning of the philosophy class, we have a middle, and we have the end. And our days go through a rhythm, you know, and this is experience, human experience. If it was all happening at once, it would be too much to handle. So I think time is a mercy. It's a god. It's Zervan, the Zoroastrians say, that enable us to have the soul story, the progression as we go through life. And in that board game I'm talking about, to have the initiatory experiences, you know, the challenge that we overcome, we lose some things, we get defeated, but then we have a victory, we bounce back. All sages and all humans go through this cycle, the falling in love, the finding, you know, people to love and so on. And yet, and that's why we are here in human form, to have these experiences in that sequential way. And I think that's what time is for. So anyway, that's just a thought about time. It's a good thing. And I've lived long enough to have lived many lives, you know, just in this one incarnation. Yes, it's fun. Right, let me find the poem. Let's see if we can end. And I'm going to be a bit naughty. I'm going to try and do some music for this. Because the other thing today is it's Bloom Day. And in Dublin, this was the day on which James Joyce set his famous novel, Ulysses. So in Ireland, it's quite a big thing, this Bloomsday, and people are enjoying the poetry and all that. So I thought, in honour of my Irish colleagues, I'm going to do a poem set to music. We'll see if it works.
Sure.
And I have this beautiful harp here.